Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're starting with a an assumption, really. It's an idea that governs, well, almost every aspect of our lives,
hmm
from how we think about our relationships to how we, design a business strategy. And it's this. We believe that knowledge means finding the right answer.
We want the solution.
Exactly. We crave solutions. We want these fixed definitions, these clear endpoints, and, absolute certainty.
But what if that whole quest for the answer is?
Yeah.
Well, what if it's fundamentally misguided?
How so?
What if the answers you get are infinitely less important than the questions you ask? And that's really the profound tension we're diving into today, this idea that the greatest truths aren't solutions at all, but problems.
And that this distinction, the answer versus the question, is the actual engine of all creativity, of all knowledge.
Precisely.
So that's the intellectual itch we're going to be scratching. And it is a massive, massive shift in perspective. For you, the learner, this deep dive is, well, it's a shortcut to understanding a pretty revolutionary theory of knowledge, one that's rooted in difference.
Right. The goal here is to learn how to stop just passively receiving knowledge, the solutions, the concepts, and instead to start actively engaging with the complex structures that generate them.
Which this tradition we're exploring calls ideas or problems.
Same thing, really.
Mhm.
And we're unpacking a very dense, very rigorous text that totally redefines what an idea is. We'll
Yep.
try and move past the traditional, often abstract philosophical understanding of concepts and essences.
Okay.
Our source is arguing that ideas are these complex, objective realities. They're structures that are as real as any physical law. They operate like a high-level system that governs everything from the rules of differential calculus all the way to the structure of human society.
So we're essentially establishing a differential philosophy, one that's based on multiplicity, genesis, and the mathematics of change.
It's the algebra of pure thought.
And we are going deep into the engine room. Okay, let's unpack this core tension. I think we have to start where the source material begins, which is really the origin point for this particular theory of ideas.
We have to start with Kant.
We have to start with Kant. The source reminds us that for Kant, the idea in its truest form is always problematic.
That's right, and we really need to understand that word, problematic.
Yeah.
It's so easy to hear it and think troublesome or vague.
Yeah, a problem you need to solve and then get rid of.
Exactly. But here it means generative. For Kant, reason, at its deepest, most fundamental level, is simply the faculty of posing problems. That's its function. If reason sometimes leads us astray, to illusions or contradictions, it's because we lack a mechanism to critically evaluate the structure of the problem itself.
Okay, so reason's job is to pose the problem. But what is the problem trying to achieve? This leads us to a really crucial distinction the source makes between a simple answer and a true solution.
Right.
Like, I might be in a lab and find scattered empirical results, little answers, but a true solution that requires something bigger, an organized, systematic field.
Exactly. The idea doesn't just hand you the answer. It constitutes the true problem. Think of it like the blueprint of the systematic unity that has to exist for all the understanding's operations to make sense.
So it transforms these isolated, random findings.
Into structured cases.
Mhm.
Cases that all belong to a single overarching solution. This is why Kant saw the idea in its legitimate, or what he called its regulative role, as being fundamentally problematic.
And this feels like a vital takeaway for anyone trying to learn something complex. The idea, the problem, it doesn't just disappear once you've done the empirical work.
No, not at all. On the contrary, the source describes them as the indispensable condition without which no solution would ever exist.
The problem isn't the hurdle you have to overcome to get to the solution.
The problem is the engine that drives you forward, that makes the solution possible in the first place.
And furthermore, we have to recognize that these problems, these ideas, have an objective value. This isn't just about subjective mental acts or, fictions we invent.
Right. The object of an idea. You can't know it directly or empirically, give it, but it must be represented in this problematic form. The core nature of this object is that it's, and this sounds like a contradiction, objective and undetermined.
Okay, wait, let's slow down there because that feels tricky. If something is objective, we usually assume it's fixed, it's determined. When I hear undetermined, I assume there's a lack of some kind.
A missing piece of data.
Yeah, an imperfection in our current knowledge. So how can the source insist that this is a positive, objective structure?
That's a necessary clarification. It's a great question. It's undetermined only in the sense that it can't be pinned down by a simple concept from our understanding, It's not empty. It possesses a positive structure of complexity. The source actually breaks this down into 3 defining moments.
Okay.
So first, the idea is undetermined with regard to its own object. It acts as a kind of focus or a horizon, a point towards which all our knowledge converges, but which knowledge itself can never fully reach or grasp.
Like the ideal limit of a scientific field, maybe?
That's a good analogy. Then second, it is determinable with regard to the objects of our experience. It provides the unity for those objects. It organizes them by analogy. So that the things we can sense and experience, they offer the idea an analogous determination in return for the systematic unity it gives them.
So the idea acts as a kind of complex filter. It's an organizer for all our messy empirical observations. And the third moment completes the structure.
Yes, the third moment carries what's called the ideal of infinite determination. The idea specifies the concepts of the understanding infinitely,
You mean?
meaning it allows those concepts to comprise more and more differences across a continuous open field. It's like an endless wellspring of potential knowledge, always pushing the boundaries.
It's fascinating how the source connects this whole 3-part structure back to the philosophical starting point of modern thought.
The cogito.
Descartes' think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're saying these ideas actually emerge from the very act of self-awareness.
Precisely. The cogito is often analyzed in 3 parts.
Right.
You have undetermined existence, just the bare fact that I exist, then determinable existence in time, the fact that I exist now, and finally, infinite determination, the I think, as a continuous ongoing operation.
Oh.
The source claims that ideas are exactly the thoughts of the cogito, the differentials of thought. And because the cogito refers to a fractured I, an I that is split by the very form of time that makes thought possible in the first place, the ideas just swarm in the fracture. They're constantly emerging and composing themselves. They are the interiorization of that fundamental split.
And that's the bridge we needed. The idea is the element of pure difference. It is the fracture itself, which is why we have to turn to mathematics. Because differential calculus is literally the study of instantaneous change, of pure difference. And now we get to the core model for this entire differential philosophy.
The mathematical differential, 6-met.
This is where it gets really interesting.
The symbol cower is treated here as having this profound ontological power. I mean, traditionally, in modern scientific technique, Chaperas is often treated as a mere infinitesimal.
Just a quantity so small it's practically negligible.
Right. It's mathematically convenient, sure, but it's seen as philosophically empty. Our source completely rejects this. It argues that diminishing its value like that misses its entire significance. Cowarest has to be taken seriously as the pure philosophical idea, as the problem itself.
Okay, but hold on. If the differential symbol 10 nothing in relation to $6, how can we then turn around and say it has objective value? That sounds like the ultimate form of a negligible approximation. If the distance between 2 points on a curve as that distance approaches 0, isn't that, by definition, an absence?
That's the exact tension we need to hold on to. It's nothing in relation to the fixed variable, which is $6, or the variable quantity, the quantitas. Its power lies in what it annihilates to reveal something much deeper. It expresses what the source calls the universal cut.
The universal cut. Break that down for us.
The differential zeroes out the fixed particular value of intuition, which is called the quantum. It also zeroes out the variable general quantity of the understanding, the quantitas. So yes, singular strictly nothing relative to those 2 domains.
The power, then, lies in what's left over after this annihilation. After you've cleared away the particular, the quantum, and the general, the quantitas, what remains?
What remains is the differential field itself, which is revealed in favor of the universal and its appearance. The source brings in Bordas de Moulin here, who saw the limit not as some infinite approximation, not as a technical tool.
But as a genuine cut.
A genuine cut, a border that separates the changeable part of reality, the variability, from the unchangeable part, which is the universal function. What gets canceled out is the mutable, empirical part of the function, revealing only the immutable, ideal operation that defines the function itself.
I see. It reminds me of when Dedekind used his famous cut to define irrational numbers. He separated all the rational numbers into 2 sets to reveal a totally new kind of number, something that was always there but was just obscured by the existing system.
That's a perfect parallel. This tact cut reveals the ideal cause of continuity.
So it establishes the pure element of quantitability.
Yes. And by being simultaneously undetermined relative to the variable $6, determinable in its relational structure, and a determination, which is the cut itself, Tech confirms its structure as the problematic idea. It's the absolute minimal element of difference required to generate everything else.
That mathematical interpretation of the text as the universal cut really gives us the building blocks for the next stage. Now we can move away from, simplistic causality, that old tired logic of why does X cause Y,
Right.
and instead we can define a new difference-based structure of sufficient reason. This feels like the engine room of the whole philosophy.
That's right. We're constructing a logic that doesn't ask why, but asks what complex structure generates this multiplicity. The source maps those three aspects of the idea we talked about, undetermined, determinable, and determined, onto three new principles of difference. And they completely transform our understanding of reason.
Okay, let's start with the undetermined Sigenerics, $1. This corresponds to the principle of determinability, or what we can call quantitability. What are we dealing with here? Let's label them first. Quantitability it's the stuff before it's organized, right? The raw material.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Quantitability concerns the unformed elements. These differential elements, Tepperkin and 5s, they're nothing in relation to the variable 16 and 5. They are completely undifferentiated in the normal, empirical, or general sense.
Right.
But, and this is crucial, they are perfectly differentiated in and by the universal.
Can you give us a non-mathematical example? What does that undifferentiated stuff look like in the real world?
Okay, consider the idea of fire. It subsumes a continuous mass that's capable of increase, like a pile of wood, for example. That continuousness, that potential for growth and change. That is the element of quantitability. It's the ideal cause of continuity that we establish with the universal cut, and it deals with the elements before they form any kind of fixed relationship. It's pure potential volume.
Got it. So that's the stuff. Now we move to the relationship itself. This is the truly determinable part, and it corresponds to the principle of reciprocal determination, or qualitability. So qualitability is how this stuff relates.
Yes, this is where true synthesis happens. This is where the idea starts to actually structure itself. The relation talks is absolutely essential because neither term, neither Dieter nor Sexton's, exists absolutely or independently. Each one only exists in relation to the other. It's not like a fraction between two fixed numbers. It's a dynamic, continuous relationship.
And this relationship, the synthesis, eliminates what the source calls variability.
It does. Variability is just a fixed relationship that you apply to variable empirical determinations. Instead, it promotes what is called variety or multiplicity, where the relation itself is what varies dynamically.
That distinction between variability and variety is incredibly subtle. I think it's critical we slow down here. Variability sounds like taking a mold and just pouring different amounts of liquid into it. The structure, the mold, stays fixed, but the amount changes.
Good analogy.
So what is variety then?
Variety is when the mold itself shifts and changes as you pour. The differential relation, that drawn, expresses a function that is different in kind from the primitive function. If the primitive function is, say, distance over time, so position, the differential relation is speed, velocity.
And velocity isn't just a different amount of position.
Exactly. It's a fundamentally new quality. It's a qualitative change.
And this qualitative determination is the key. This is the source of the production of real objects.
Just as the Dedekind cut produced irrational numbers, which are different in kind from the rational series, the differential relation generates something qualitatively new. It integrates variation not as fixed variability, but as genuine variety.
Which brings us to the third principle, the one that organizes these relations. The principle of complete determination, or potentiality. So, if quantitability is the stuff, and qualitability is how it relates, then potentiality is.
Is it where that relationship breaks or peaks, the structure that emerges from the relationship?
Exactly. Complete determination concerns the final composition of a form, or, more accurately, the distribution of its singular points. It asks, under what specific conditions does this dynamic relationship become a specific thing?
And this happens when the relation headache takes on specific values.
Right. When it becomes null, for instance, which gives you a dip or a peak in the curve. Or when it becomes infinite, giving you a vertical tangent. Or even when it takes the indeterminate form easy dollars, which gives you a node or a cusp on a curve.
And these are the singularities, the critical points. They're the critical points that provide the essential concrete conditions of the problem. This is what ensures the idea is a concrete universal. It embraces variety, multiplicity, and singularity all at once. The individual thing isn't just a mere instance of some abstract category. The singularity itself is the pre-individual condition that structures the universal.
So we have this flowing synthesis. Quantitability, the stuff, points toward qualitability, the relationship. And qualitability points toward potentiality, the structure of singularities. This entire threefold structure is the new comprehensive figure of sufficient reason.
And this structure is crucial because it overcomes what the source sees as a historical failure of philosophy. Specifically, Kant's maintenance of an external duality between the concept and intuition.
This is Salomon Maimon's critique, if I remember correctly. He argued that Kant's dualism kept difference external, which reduced the whole transcendental project to mere conditioning.
Right.
How did that block genuine genesis?
Well, if the idea is only undetermined in itself, but it's only determinable relative to external objects of experience, then the whole relationship is extrinsic. It's outside. It limits reason to simply conditioning what we can perceive rather than actually generating the structure of reality.
It's not creating, it's just organizing.
Exactly. For true genesis, the difference has to be internalized. Determinability must inherently point towards reciprocal determination.
Let's use the straight line example from the text. If we understand the straight line, the shortest path between 2 points through Kant's external conditioning, what is it?
It's just a schema of construction. It's a rule that's established between the fixed concept of line and the intuition of space. The difference between a straight line and a curved line remains external to both. You're conditioning the space, not generating the structure of the line itself.
But if we adopt this genetic point of view, the shortest path is an idea that overcomes that duality.
It internalizes the difference. The shortest path is understood not as a static rule, but as the expression of an internal difference, a reciprocal determination and the minimal conditions of an integral. The shortest path is defined by the internal force that is constantly differentiating between straightness and curvature.
So it expresses a pure differential unconscious.
An unconscious of thought, yes, that contains the necessary movements and dynamics to generate the line. This movement is what makes the impossible operation of conscious thought possible.
Okay, so we've established that the problematic idea is this positive differential structure. It's operating in the unconscious, and it's generating reality. Now we get to the confrontation, the showdown with the villain.
Traditional philosophical thinking.
Thinking based on representation and fixed identity. The source makes it crystal clear that the idea is extra-propositional and sub-representative. It doesn't exist in the realm of simple, fixed statements.
That's the core of the attack. I mean, traditional philosophy is obsessed with seeking fixed essences. It always asks that standard question, what is X? It relies on the identity of the concept, the assumption that X is always equal to X. This focus on fixed definitions is just fundamentally reductive.
And the source argues that this very question, what is X, is flawed. It's fundamentally broken because it leads directly to contradiction and to false problems.
Precisely. If you push that question of essence too hard, the traditional dialectic just collapses into the movement of the negative. You start defining X by what it is not.
Right.
Instead, this philosophy advocates prioritizing questions of accident and event, questions that deal with multiplicity and dynamics. Things like, how much? How does it change? And in what specific cases does this occur? And fundamentally, who is capable of sustaining this difference? That is a radical shift. It's moving from abstract definition to dynamic evaluation. It's a philosophy that's rooted in specifics. The text even suggests that the domain of ideas is that of the inessential. Why the inessential? That sounds counterintuitive. Because the problem isn't tied to discovering some hidden pure essence of thingness. It's tied to the continuous dynamic evaluation of the distribution of singular and regular points. What's important, what's not, how much, and when. This happens entirely within the inessential description of a multiplicity. We're not looking for the definition of the concept. We're looking for the precise conditions that make the problem exist.
And to describe these true philosophical ideas, the source introduces this.
Well, it's a fascinating and almost aggressive term, vice diction. And it's set up in opposition to the passive acceptance of contradiction. Can you break down what vice diction is and how it operates in practice?
Vice diction is the procedure for progressively determining the problem, the idea. It's how the idea becomes fully specific and concrete. It involves 2 movements.
Okay.
First is the specification of adjunct fields. This just means discovering the necessary varieties of multiplicity that you have to add to the problem's initial field to make it solvable. You realize your initial framing of the problem was too small, too narrow, and you have to progressively determine its true conditions. And the second movement, the dramatic one.
That is the condensation of singularities. This is the ultimate moment of decision, of resolution. Vice diction precipitates all those scattered critical points, the dips, the nodes, the points of fusion and freezing, and it brings them all together into a single decisive moment, a sublime occasion, or what the Greeks called kairos.
And this moment causes the solution to just explode.
Exactly. It's abrupt and revolutionary, rather than emerging slowly through a series of logical steps. It is the point where, as the poet Charles Peguy suggested, a problem, without any logical issue, suddenly just ceases to exist at a physical point of resolution.
That moment, that condensation, it sounds like it requires immense mental pressure.
It does. The source suggests that having an idea involves these intense affective forces. It compares it to having two faces, like love and anger.
Love and anger.
Love in the progressive search for those necessary adjunct fields, expanding the problem's scope, and anger in the final condensation of singularities that defines a revolutionary situation demanding action.
But now we have to address what is probably the most counterintuitive aspect of this entire philosophy, the one that truly sets it apart from most of traditional Western thought. And that's the philosophical scandal, that the idea contains no negative terms or relations, that it is pure positivity.
That's right. This is a huge claim. The great struggle of thought, according to this text, isn't between right and wrong or A versus not A. It is between the positive world of difference and the deceptive shadow cast by negativity.
The shadow.
The idea, in its virtual structure, is composed purely of reciprocal relations between differential elements and singular points. There is no contradiction, no opposition, and no negative term within the problem itself. The source reserves the name positivity for this pure differential state of the problematic.
Okay, so if the idea is pure positivity, then where does all the negation come from? Where do contradiction and error that we see all over the world, where do they come from?
Negation is merely a derived shadow of the problem. That's the key. When the problem's positive, subsisting structure gets translated into propositions, into fixed statements of consciousness, or into solutions, that complex three-dimensional structure is reflected back as a distortion. A shadow.
That's the perfect analogy. We mistake the flat, dark shape of the shadow for the infinitely complex generative object that cast it.
Exactly. And this derived negative has two primary determinations. First, it is the shadow of the problem as such. The proposition is flanked by a double negative because it can only express the positive structure of the problem by distorting it.
And the second?
Second, the negative constitutes the objective field of the false problem. This is what we often call the fetish or the illusion in society. Fetishism, for example, is an objective illusion born out of the conditions of social consciousness during actualization, where the positive problematic structure is reflected back as an inseparable falsity that we then accept as real.
And we even see this distortion happening in linguistics. The source discusses how phonology often mistakenly interprets difference as opposition, as something negative.
Yes, it's a great example. When linguists define the difference between phonemes, say, between the sound P and B, in terms of opposition, they are already adopting the viewpoint of consciousness. Or even, as the source puts it, the viewpoint of the bad listener who hesitates between several possible versions of what was actually said.
They're focusing on the result of the difference, which appears negative to the confused listener.
Right. But the true difference is a differential position, which is a purely positive structure. It represents the speaker's transcendent activity and the idea's pure multiplicity, not the listener's hesitation or confusion. The difference is the positive force. The opposition is just the derived shadow.
So, the idea is pure positivity, structured by differential relations. That brings us to the question of its existence. If the idea is real, but it's not actual, we need a new way to describe its reality. And that term is the virtual. Let's define the idea, then, as an n-dimensional, continuous, defined multiplicity, an organization of the many as such, independent of the concept of unity.
This is the central conceptual distinction in this entire section, and we have to be really precise. The virtual is opposed to the actual. It is not opposed to the real.
Okay, that's important. The virtual is real.
The source stresses that the virtual is fully real insofar as it is virtual. It's completely determined in its structure. It is not some vague potential or confused notion. It is the highly complex structure formed by its genetic differential elements and its reciprocal relations.
Let me try to rephrase that for us. The virtual is the reality of the rules of the game, fully determined and complex, while the actual is the reality of the players and their actions on the board.
Oh, I like that.
They're both real, but there are fundamentally different kinds of reality. Is that close?
That's a powerful metaphor, yeah. The virtual contains the structure and the tension of the problem. The actual contains the instantiation of solutions. Now, why is it so important to distinguish the virtual from the possible?
This is crucial because in everyday language, we often use virtual and possible almost interchangeably.
In philosophy, the difference is one of genuine creation versus mere resemblance. The possible is traditionally opposed to the real. The process it undergoes is realization. And possibilities, well, they only resemble the actual things they realize.
They add nothing fundamentally new.
Nothing. They are just concepts waiting for their moment of existence. The source calls it fabricated after the fact.
So if I had the possibility of drawing a circle, the actual drawing of the circle just looks like the idea of the circle. No real creation is required.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Conversely, the virtual is real and determined, and it undergoes actualization. And actualization always takes place via difference and divergence. When the virtual is actualized, it generates divergent lines and new forms which do not resemble the virtual multiplicity they incarnate. It's an act of genuine creation.
The actual circle, generated from the idea of curvature, will always contain elements and singularities that were not predictable, simply from the concept of a possible circle.
That's it.
And this creative process, this movement from the virtual problem to the actual solution, is designated by this complex term, differentiation, with the T and the C signifying the distinction of difference itself.
It's a beautifully concise term for a dual process.
Yeah.
So differentiation with T is the internal determination of the virtual content of the idea as a problem. It's the abstract work of assigning the differential relations and the singularities. It's the pure thought of the structure.
And differentiation with the C is the messy, real-world deployment of that structure.
Yes, that is the actualization of that virtuality into species and distinguished parts. It's the constitution of solutions through local integrations in space and time. It is the genuine act of creation, the deployment of the virtual structure into the actual world. And remember, the negative only appears when the actual terms that result from this creation are cut off from the virtual problem that gave them birth.
To bring this abstract structure into a living context, the source uses the concept of dramatization. The world is a theater of becoming, where ideas are actualized through these hidden spatio-temporal dynamisms.
This is where we look beneath the static qualities we usually observe, the size, the color, the shape of things, to find the underlying forces and speeds that create them. The source uses the organism, specifically embryology, as a really powerful case study. It references Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire's idea that anatomical elements are linked by ideal relations of reciprocal determination, a virtual essence of the animal in itself.
So modern genetics provides the structure for the virtual problem.
Yes, it refines it dramatically. Genes are the differential elements, the loci or distinctive points that form a virtual structure or potentiality. The genesis of development, the embryo growing, is the actualization of that virtual essence, and it's driven by differential rhythms, speeds, and forces acting upon the material.
The source describes the embryo itself as the theater of this actualization.
The development of the egg is governed by a whole kinematics and dynamics. You have morphogenetic movements like cell migration, different cell division rates, chemical gradients. These processes follow the requirements of a role or a structural theme that's laid out in the idea. This entire dynamic process is dramatization.
And the subjects undergoing these force movements, there's an amazing example of the dizzying rotation of the tortoise neck protovertebrae, the raw material being shaped by the idea's creation. These are called larval subjects. That sounds agonizing.
It is.
So we're basically saying that personal growth or creation is philosophically guaranteed to feel like having protovertebrae violently rotating in your neck.
That's the dramatic truth the source insists upon. These are the larval subjects. They are the patients upon whom the idea acts, demonstrating that Genesis is not some gentle transformation, but a series of cruel, forced movements. The larvae sustain the idea's creation in their very flesh. They are living the unlivable difference. They are the transitional stages where the intensity of the virtual problem translates into the extensities of the actual world.
This dramatization, this movement of differentiation, it distinguishes itself into two inseparable, complementary paths of actualization.
These paths reflect the two central ways the idea determines reality. The first path is the determination of species, which incarnates the differential relations. This gathers the time of the dynamism, the rhythms, and speeds into a quality, like frogness or mammalness. This is the qualitative output.
And the second path?
That is the composition of parts. This incarnates the singularities outlining the space itself. This defines the extensities, the number and position of bones, the arrangement of organs. Quality always flashes within a space and endures the whole time of that space. So differentiation is therefore simultaneously qualitative and quantitative, ensuring the virtual structure and the actual output fit together precisely, even though they don't look alike at all.
Okay, so we have the idea operating in the virtual realm. It's using differential logic. It's driving creative actualization via dramatization and these larval subjects. How does this structure translate into the act of conscious human thought? The source claims ideas require the transcendence of the faculties, dismantling our traditional notion of common sense.
Right. Common sense relies on the assumption of a fixed identity. It assumes that all our faculties, thinking, speaking, feeling, all converge and collaborate harmoniously. But ideas operate in a state of what the source calls discordant harmony or parasense. Ideas are the elements of this parasense, animating the disjoint exercise of the faculties from a transcendental point of view.
So my thought process, my emotions, my speech, they're all being guided by the same idea, but they aren't merging into one big, happy, unified thought.
No.
They transmit their violence to each other by powder fuse, like will-o'-the-wisps passing a message.
That's right. And this disjoint operation is where the unconscious plays its critical role. Your unconscious isn't just a place for repressed desires, it is the factory of pure thought. It's running a secret differential calculus that makes your conscious knowledge possible.
So it's the necessary non-actual element of thought.
It's the pure thought of the cogitanda, that which cannot be thought by the conscious mind, yet must be thought for knowledge to proceed. Thought thinks only on the basis of this unconscious differential structure.
The true movement of thought, then, is always from the problematical to the question. And these questions, they don't just pop into our heads randomly. They emanate from what the source calls imperatives of adventure, a fiat, a power of decision.
This is the ontological imperative. It is the power of decision that makes us semi-divine beings. And it's grounded in the very nature of the problems we encounter. It's not the moral categorical imperative of Kant, which tells you how you should act rationally. This is a fundamental existential force demanding that you pose the problem.
The analogy used to describe this imperative, this power of decision, is one of the most provocative in the entire text. The throw of the dice.
It's a powerful one. The throw is the imperative in action. The open space is the whole sky chance. But critically, the throw does not abolish chance by fragmenting it with probability laws, trying to predict the outcome.
No.
Instead, the throw affirms all of chance every time. It condenses the entire continuum of possibility into one single aleatory point.
So the affirmation of chance is what abolishes arbitrariness. If you affirm the totality of chance, every outcome is equally validated by that affirmation.
Precisely. Once chance is sufficiently affirmed through the throw, the player can no longer truly lose, because every combination that results is adequate to the aleatory point affirmed by the throw. The throw is carrying out the calculation of problems. It's determining the differential elements that constitute the structure. The problematic combinations, the ideas, result from throws that resonate together. It's an affirmation of difference.
But where does this initial question, this initial imperative even come from, if not from external experience?
The origin of the problem lies in the repetition of the question. But we have to distinguish very carefully between two types of repetition.
Okay.
Bare repetition is the repetition of the same. It's like a tick-tock, or simply continuing in time. This results from a conceptual blockage. It's static.
And the powerful creative repetition.
That is the closed repetition, or the reprise and condensation of pre-individual singularities. This is the repetition that results from the affirmation of difference. Repetition in this sense, the eternal return of the new, is not continuation. It's the dissolution of all prior fixed identities to allow the singular conditions to recommence.
So this clothed repetition, the recommencement of being, is the necessary provided condition that authenticates the imperatives of being.
Yes, and this ontology rejects that hypothetical moralistic movement of thought that seeks absolute apodictic certainty. And instead, it places the question, the throw of the dice, and the resultant problem structure as the ultimate ontological reality.
This finally brings us to the most applicable distinction for you, the learner, the difference between knowledge and learning. Knowledge is just recognition. Learning is transformation.
That's it. Knowledge, because it's based on representation, is modeled entirely on fixed propositions of consciousness that define solutions. Learning, however, is an infinite learning dedicated to problems. It is the apprehension and condensation of singularities.
And this learning process is violent. It demands transformation.
It requires the transformation of our body and our language. The classic example is learning to swim. It's not about intellectually recognizing the movements. It's about a violent encounter that tears us apart. It's about composing the singular points of your body with those of the water, forcing you into an unknown differential world of fluid mechanics.
And this transformation is the true presentation of the unconscious.
Right. It opposes the simple, passive recognition that defines knowledge. We are dedicated only to those problems that demand this fundamental transformation of who we are.
In short, the idea is not an element of what we know, but of what we are infinitely learning. We have completed a demanding yet, I think, an astonishing deep dive into a philosophy that systematically replaces fixed essences, contradiction, and negation.
And replaces them with positive, virtual multiplicities, reciprocal determination, and creative actualization.
We've established that the problem isn't a temporary subjective lack, but a dynamic, real element. It's fully determined in its structure, just waiting to be actualized.
We have to start treating concepts like the idea and the question as active, objective structures that condition reality itself.
And here are the high stakes for you, the learner. If we confine ourselves to just seeking solutions to hypotheses, we lose sight of our greatest power. True power lies in recognizing, formulating, and affirming the complex, singular conditions of the problems that define our world.
Whether they are social dilemmas, scientific challenges, or personal struggles.
And remember the fundamental rule of creation.
The virtual possesses the reality of a task to be performed or a problem to be solved. It is the problem which orientates, conditions, and engenders solutions. But these do not resemble the conditions of the problem.
You will not recognize the solution in the complexity of the problem.
I know.
So the next time you face a profound challenge, don't see it as a failure of logic or a limitation or some contradiction you have to eliminate. See it as an opportunity for differentiation. See it as a chance to transform yourself into a larval subject capable of sustaining the creative, often difficult movement of the idea. That transformation, that affirmation of difference, that is the true algebra of pure thought in action.
Go forth and affirm chance.
We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.